The hospital's charity gala glittered under crystal chandeliers, champagne glasses raised, and the sound of a grand piano drifting beneath the vaulted ceiling. In the middle of applause, Evan, my husband, stood beside his mother, his face confident, his eyes cold. Before hundreds of guests, he smiled and declared, "I want my freedom. This marriage ends here." A wave of whispers rippled through the hall, and every gaze turned to me. 6 years of infertility, 6 years of endurance, and now I was being humiliated in public, right in the place I once thought was my sanctuary. 6 years into our marriage, I could measure time by doctor visits instead of birthdays. I knew the hum of the clinic's elevator, the sting of December air outside the fertility office, the way hope felt when it tried to be brave. That night, though, time measured itself by the scrape of a fork against a plate. We were at a small Italian place near the river, the one with the candles in wine bottles. My husband, Evan, kept his coat on. He stared past me, toward the door, as if he needed to be ready to leave the second it opened. He didn't ask how the labs went. He didn't ask about the call I'd taken in the hallway, where the nurse gently reminded me to hydrate after the last failed transfer. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, "I can't do this anymore." The candles sputtered. I asked what this meant, even though every cell in my body already knew. He said the word marriage, careful and neat, like he was placing it on a shelf. The room didn't tilt, it just went cold. I tried to breathe without sounding desperate. My palms shook against the tablecloth, leaving faint, damp crescents. He started talking about exhaustion, about wanting a life that wasn't a calendar of injections. I heard the rest through a tunnel. He'd met someone. It wasn't planned. He felt alive again. I thought of the plastic sharps container under our sink, bright red, full of proof that I had been willing to bleed for us. I asked if his mother knew. He flinched. Of course she did. She always did. She'd told me last Thanksgiving that women who couldn't carry should know when to stop dragging a man through pity. I had laughed it off then, spooning cranberry sauce like armor. I didn't cry at the table. I waited until the server brought the check, apologized for nothing, and left a tip that made no sense. Outside, the river smelled like metal, and the wind pressed my coat against my ribs. Evan's phone buzzed. He angled it away. The glow lit his cheekbones, and I hated myself for noticing he still looked beautiful. "I'll sleep at my brother's," he said. "We can talk Saturday, about logistics." The word logistics sounded like a forklift backing up over a garden. I walked home alone. Our apartment felt staged, like a model unit pretending to be lived in. I opened the cabinet and found the IVF folder we'd labeled in thick marker. Our future. Inside were consent forms, schedules, notes I'd written in blue pen to remind myself to hope. At the back, there was a printout I'd never actually read, a summary of our storage account. 5 frozen embryos remained. I sank to the kitchen floor and traced the number with my finger. 5. 5 small chances sleeping in liquid nitrogen, waiting for a decision. My phone blinked with a message from my mother-in-law. "It's time to be realistic." She must have been waiting all night to send it. I didn't reply. I opened the clinic's portal instead, the one I had memorized like a second language. Under contacts, 2 names appeared. Mine and Evan's. My stomach tightened when I saw his email still marked as primary. Somewhere between hope and habit, I had left a door unlocked. I changed the setting to my own and hit save. It was a tiny click, a sound only I could hear, but it echoed like a vow. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and listened to the radiator hiss. At 3 in the morning, I finally let myself cry, quiet and ugly, into a towel. The tears didn't feel tragic. They felt medicinal, like something poisonous leaving my body. By the time the sky lightened, I had decided. If this marriage was ending, I would not end with it. I would call the clinic when they opened. I would ask about the 5. I would ask what belonged to me. I would ask what could still become. The first Saturday after Evan left, I folded his shirts into a box. They still smelled like his cologne, sharp and bitter. The apartment looked bigger without his shoes by the door, but not in a good way. It felt like a stage after the actors had left, props abandoned, silence too heavy. I should have felt free, but instead I felt like a guest in my own life. His mother called at noon. Her voice was clipped, rehearsed. She asked if I was ready to sign. I told her nothing was signed yet. She didn't sigh. She laughed, soft and cruel. "A man like Evan deserves children," she said. "Don't stand in his way." I wanted to scream that I had been standing in line for injections, ultrasounds, and surgeries for 6 years. I wanted to remind her that her son had left me in a restaurant with a bill and a confession. Instead, I hung up. My hands shook afterward, but not from fear, from rage. I opened my laptop and pulled up the clinic's site again. 5 embryos. 5 little cells suspended in cold, invisible sleep. The nurse I spoke with on the phone that Monday was kind, careful with her words. Yes, the embryos were still viable. Yes, I could move forward alone. No, I didn't need Evan's permission anymore. The contracts we'd signed allowed independent use if the marriage dissolved. I felt a knot inside me loosen just slightly. For the first time in years, I wasn't begging for his agreement. I was simply deciding. Still, doubt crept in. I was 36, working in a public library, barely making rent. Could I raise a child alone? Could I shoulder the judgment of everyone who would whisper about a divorced woman chasing motherhood without a husband? That night, as I closed the curtains, I saw my reflection in the window. Tired eyes, thin lips, a body softened by years of hormones. And yet, beneath the exhaustion, I caught something else, a stubborn spark. I whispered out loud, "You're still here." It was the first time I believed it. Evan stopped by midweek to pick up the last of his things. He didn't look guilty. He looked lighter, almost relieved. He said we should be civil. I nodded. Then he noticed the IVF folder on the table. His eyes flickered. "You're not still?" he started. I closed the folder calmly and told him he didn't need to worry about my plans anymore. His jaw tightened, but he didn't press. He left with his box of shirts, and I locked the door behind him. At the clinic, I scheduled the transfer. Just like that. A date on the calendar. A circle drawn in red pen. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and hope, and the women sitting beside me all carried their own invisible battles. For once, I didn't feel like a failure among them. I felt like a fighter. When the doctor asked how many embryos I wanted to transfer, my throat went dry. 2, I said. Maybe it was reckless. Maybe it was fate. He nodded, and the nurse smiled like she knew a secret. Driving home, I rolled down the window and let the cold air sting my cheeks. I thought about how my life had been reduced to numbers, cycles, shots, embryos, and now I was holding 2 of those numbers inside me. Possibilities, not statistics. For the first time since Evan's confession, I felt lighter. Not free of pain, but free of his shadow. That night I slept without waking. When I dreamed, I wasn't alone. I dreamed of 2 small hands reaching toward me, not from the past, but from the future. And for once, I didn't wake up crying. I woke up ready. The morning of the blood test, I sat in the clinic's waiting room, clutching my phone like a lifeline. The walls were pale blue, meant to calm, but my heart beat so loudly that the chairs around me seemed to vibrate. I had told no one. Not my mother, not my closest friend, certainly not Evan. This moment was mine. For once, I wasn't sharing it with anyone who could twist it into shame. The nurse called my name. Her smile was soft, practiced, but my legs felt wooden as I followed her. The blood draw took less than 5 minutes. "We'll call you this afternoon," she said. The wait stretched like an endless hallway. I wandered into the city park near the clinic, sat on a bench, and tried not to count every minute. By noon, I couldn't stand it anymore. I walked home, pacing the apartment like a caged animal, staring at the silent phone. When it finally rang, I almost dropped it. The nurse's voice was steady, but my ears roared with blood. "Congratulations," she said. "Your levels are strong. You're pregnant. Pregnant." The word didn't sound real. I pressed my palm flat against my stomach, though I knew there was nothing to feel yet. Tears came fast, not of grief this time, but of raw relief. 6 years of failure, of bruised skin and broken promises, and here I was, finally carrying something that was mine. 2 weeks later, the ultrasound confirmed it. Not 1 flicker on the screen, but 2. 2 small heartbeats, pulsing like wings against the black void. Twins. My breath caught in my chest, a laugh mixing with sobs. The doctor explained risks, statistics, precautions, but I barely heard. I was mesmerized by the sound, thump, 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 echoing through the room. I whispered, "I'm not alone anymore." The nurse squeezed my shoulder. For once there was no pity in her touch, only joy. At home, I placed the ultrasound photo on the refrigerator with a magnet. The apartment still felt empty, but now the silence was different. It wasn't hollow, it was expectant. I began talking to them, softly, as if they could already hear me. "We're going to make it," I said while chopping vegetables. "You're stronger than anyone knows." My voice filled the rooms Evan had abandoned. Still, shadows lingered. My mother-in-law sent another message, warning me that I was throwing my life away chasing ghosts. I deleted it without replying. For once, her words didn't penetrate. Evan hadn't called or written, but I knew it was only a matter of time before news reached him. The clinic had promised confidentiality, yet his name was still somewhere in their records. A knot of dread twisted in my gut, but I pushed it aside. I wanted to live inside this fragile miracle, at least for now. I worked extra hours at the library, saving every dollar. Pregnancy made me nauseous, dizzy, but I welcomed every wave of sickness. It was proof, evidence I could feel in my bones. At night, I dreamed of 2 cribs side by side, soft blankets folded neatly, lullabies humming from the corner. For the first time in years, my dreams weren't nightmares of loss. They were promises of life. One evening, while shelving books, I noticed a young girl reading alone. She looked up, her eyes wide, and asked if babies could hear music in the womb. I smiled, touched my belly, and said, "Yes, they can." Her grin was so bright it almost hurt. I realized then that my children would never lack love. I had enough for all 3 of us. I walked home under streetlights, snow beginning to fall, and whispered to the night sky, "We're gonna be okay. I promise you, we will." By the end of my first trimester, the nausea had eased, but the fear had not. I guarded the secret of my twins like a fragile flame. Only my doctor, my nurse, and I knew the truth. Every morning I touched the photo on my fridge, tracing the outline of 2 tiny shadows. Every night I whispered a prayer that no one would take them from me. But secrets, I would soon learn, have a way of slipping free. It began with an envelope, a plain white one, tucked beneath my apartment door. At first, I thought it was a bill, but when I opened it, my breath froze. Inside was a folded card from the clinic. "Congratulations on your pregnancy. We look forward to supporting you during this journey." My name was there, yes, but so was Evan's. His email still tied to the account must have triggered a copy. My hands trembled as I read it twice, 3 times, my stomach tightening around the life inside me. I called the clinic immediately, voice sharp with panic. The receptionist stuttered apologies. Yes, they'd corrected the contact list. Yes, the duplicate had been a mistake. But mistakes had consequences. If Evan had received one too, it was already too late. 3 nights later, my phone lit up with his name. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity, fear, and anger mixed into one reckless impulse. His voice was calm, too calm. "So," he said, "you went ahead with it." Not a question, an accusation. I tried to steady my voice. "This has nothing to do with you anymore." Silence stretched across the line before he finally spoke again. "Nothing to do with me? Those embryos are half mine." The words sliced through me. He had abandoned me. He had chosen another woman. Yet now, suddenly, he wanted a claim. I told him firmly, "They are mine. The contract is clear." He laughed, low and bitter. "We'll see what a lawyer thinks." Then the line went dead. That night, I sat in the dark, my arms wrapped around my growing belly. Fear clawed at me, but beneath it, something stronger stirred. A steel resolve I hadn't known I possessed. These children weren't bargaining chips. They were not his redemption. They were mine. Days passed, each one heavy with dread. I waited for the inevitable knock on the door, the legal letter, the fight he promised. In the library, I found myself flinching at the sound of footsteps behind me. Even in the grocery store, I half expected to see him standing by the produce, smirking. I hated living like prey. Then, one afternoon, it happened. I came home to find him waiting on the steps of my building. His coat was pulled tight, his hair slicked back as if appearances could still save him. "We need to talk," he said. My stomach lurched, but I forced my shoulders square. There's nothing left to say. He glanced down at my belly, the swell now visible beneath my coat. His jaw tightened. "You think you can keep them from me? They're mine too." I stared at him, rage boiling past fear. "No," I said, my voice low but unshaken. "You gave up that right when you walked away. They are mine, and I will protect them." Something in my tone must have startled him, because for the first time, he didn't push back. He just looked at me, eyes dark, and muttered, "We'll see." Then he turned and walked away. I sank onto the steps after he left, my hands gripping my stomach. The babies fluttered inside me, faint but real. "Don't worry," I whispered. "No one will take you from me. Not him, not anyone." But deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were a blur of doctor appointments and sleepless nights. My belly grew heavier, my back ached, but what weighed most was the shadow of Evan's threat. Every time the phone rang, I feared it would be his lawyer. Every knock on my door felt like the beginning of a battle I wasn't ready for. Then one morning, the letter came. A thick envelope, my name typed neatly on the front. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside was a formal notice. Evan was seeking legal custody of the unborn twins. Unborn. The word felt wrong, clinical, like they were objects waiting to be claimed. I dropped the papers on the table and pressed both hands to my stomach, as if shielding my children from the ink on that page. I called the lawyer recommended by a colleague. Her office smelled of old books and strong coffee. She was firm, sharp-eyed, and she listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. "You have a solid case," she said. "The contract clearly grants you autonomy, but men like him, men with money, family influence, they drag things out. You need to be ready." Ready. I wasn't sure I ever could be. But I nodded anyway. Days turned into weeks, and the pregnancy advanced. At my 20-week scan, I watched the twins wiggle on the screen, their tiny spines curving like question marks. The doctor smiled, pointing out fingers, toes, heartbeats. I wanted to freeze time in that room, to stay in the warmth of joy without the cold breath of lawyers waiting outside. But reality snapped back the moment I stepped into the hallway and saw him. Evan was leaning against the wall, arms crossed. My chest tightened. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "I have a right to see them," he said, gesturing toward the door I just walked out of. "They're mine too." I held the ultrasound photo tighter. "You walked away, you don't get to rewrite history because you regret it now." His jaw clenched. "You think you can erase me? My mother won't allow it. We're prepared to fight." His mother. Of course. I could almost hear her voice dripping with disdain. She must have been behind this, pulling the strings, pushing him to reclaim what he had once abandoned. My stomach knotted, not just from fear but from fury. That night I spread the legal documents across my kitchen table. Words blurred, contracts twisted, but one thing remained clear. I couldn't let him win. Not just for me, but for the two small lives that depended on me. I wrote everything down, every call, every message, every unwanted appearance. Evidence. A shield I could hold when the storm broke. But even as I built my case, doubt gnawed at me. What if the court didn't see me as strong enough? What if they saw me as a woman alone, fragile, unstable, unfit? I stood before the mirror, staring at my reflection, round belly, tired eyes, trembling hands. And then slowly, I lifted my chin. "You're their mother," I told the woman staring back. "That's stronger than anything he has." The twins kicked that night, sharp and insistent, as if answering me. I placed my palms on my belly and closed my eyes. "I promise," I whispered, "no one will take you away. Not your father, not his mother, not anyone." And in that quiet room, for the first time, I believed myself. By the time spring arrived, my belly was round and firm, a visible testament to the life I carried. Strangers smiled at me in grocery aisles, held doors open, and asked how far along I was. They saw only the glow, not the storm gathering behind me. Because by then, Evan had taken the fight into the courtroom. The first hearing was a blur. The wooden benches, the stale air, the shuffle of papers, it all felt surreal. Evan sat across from me in a pressed suit, his mother at his side like a shadow. She looked at me with the same cold contempt she had used for years, only now sharpened into a weapon. I avoided her eyes and focused on my lawyer's calm instructions. "Stay steady. Speak only when asked. Remember, they want to rattle you." Evan's lawyer spoke first, painting him as a man desperate to be a father, wronged by a woman who had unilaterally decided to keep embryos that belonged to both of them. I bit my lip so hard it bled. The words made me sound like a thief, as though I had stolen my own children. When it was my turn, I stood, palms damp, knees weak. I told the judge about 6 years of treatments, about the nights I injected myself while Evan watched TV in another room, about the morning he left me in a restaurant with nothing but a bill and a confession. My voice trembled at first, but then it steadied. He abandoned me, he abandoned them, and now, only when life has begun, he wants to return. Not for them, for control. The judge listened, face unreadable. At the end, no decision was made. Instead, another hearing was scheduled. More waiting, more dread. Outside, Evan caught up to me. "You can't win," he hissed, his breath warm against my ear. "My family has resources you can't imagine. Give them to me now, and I'll make sure you're taken care of." I turned to him, anger eclipsing fear. "They are not bargaining chips. They are not yours to claim. They are my children, and I will never hand them over." His jaw tightened, but I walked away before he could respond. At home, I collapsed onto the couch, hands pressed protectively over my belly. The twins moved inside me, rolling and kicking, reminding me they were real, not just names in a file. I whispered to them, "We are stronger than him, stronger than her. They can't buy us. They can't scare us." But alone in the dark, doubt crept back. What if money really did matter more than truth? What if the law didn't see me as a mother yet, only as a vessel? I pulled the ultrasound photo from the fridge and stared at the blurry outlines. "You're mine," I whispered, tears streaking my face. "No matter what papers say, no matter what they try." The next day my lawyer called. "We'll need every record," she said. "Emails, texts, notes, anything that shows his abandonment." I gathered everything. Every cruel message from his mother, every voicemail he left when he didn't come home, every receipt from treatments I paid for alone. It was exhausting, but it was also armor. Piece by piece, I was building a shield. One night, as I organized the files, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. Swollen ankles, tired eyes, but a spine straighter than ever. I realized then that Evan was right about one thing: resources mattered. But mine weren't money or influence. Mine were truth, memory, and the relentless love of a mother who refused to be erased. And in that reflection, I no longer saw prey. I saw a woman preparing for war. The weeks dragged on like heavy chains, each day a mix of legal paperwork and prenatal appointments. By now, the twins were restless inside me, kicking and rolling, as if reminding me they were waiting for their own turn to be heard. Their presence kept me alive when exhaustion threatened to break me. At night, I would place a hand on my stomach and whisper, "You are my proof, my truth, my strength." One afternoon, I received an email from my lawyer. Attached was a copy of Evan's sworn statement. Reading it was like swallowing poison. He wrote that I had deceived him, that I had gone behind his back to use our embryos out of spite to punish him for leaving. He claimed I was unstable, unable to raise children on my own. His mother had even submitted her own letter, calling me bitter, vindictive, and unfit. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass of the window, tears burning. The words felt like knives, reopening every wound I thought had begun to heal. But then, as if on cue, one of the twins kicked hard enough to make me gasp. I laughed through the tears. They were reminding me that lies could not erase reality. They were here. They were growing. They were mine. The next doctor's visit brought a moment of peace. The ultrasound screen glowed, showing two profiles side by side, their tiny hands brushing each other like secret signals. The technician chuckled, saying, "Looks like they already know they're a team." My throat tightened. They weren't just children. They were allies, partners, survivors, just like me. But the peace didn't last. That evening, as I returned home, I found Evan waiting again, leaning against his car outside my building. My pulse quickened, but I didn't back away. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. His smile was thin, rehearsed. "Just wanted to see how far along you are. Doesn't look easy." His eyes dropped to my belly, lingering in a way that made me wrap my coat tighter. "You know," he continued, "you don't have to do this alone. We could work something out." "Work something out?" I repeated, voice sharp. "You mean hand them over and let your mother raise them while you play the hero?" His expression hardened. "You won't win in court. My family's influence runs deep. Judges listen to people like us." I took a step closer, so close I could see the faint scar on his chin from when we were kids ourselves, back when I believed he'd always protect me. "Maybe judges listen to money," I said, my voice steady, "but children listen to love. And I will never stop fighting for them." His jaw clenched, but he didn't reply. He got back into his car and drove away, tires screeching against the pavement. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, papers spread out, my hand resting on the swell of my belly. The twins shifted again, small movements that felt like encouragement. "Do you hear me?" I whispered. "We're in this together. No matter what they try, they can't buy what we have. They can't take you away from me. For the first time, I realized the twins were already giving me something Evan never could: unconditional strength. They spoke without words, reminding me every day that I was no longer just a woman fighting for survival. I was a mother, and mothers don't surrender. I closed my eyes and made a silent vow. When the time came, I would stand in that courtroom with every ounce of love and proof I had. Evan and his mother might have money, lawyers, and power, but I had two heartbeats inside me, beating in unison, louder than any lie they could tell. And that, I knew, was enough. Summer pressed down heavy, the heat making my swollen body ache. I was 7 months along when my lawyer called with urgency in her voice. "We've uncovered something," she said. "You need to come in." My stomach churned. I gathered my documents and waddled to her office, every step weighted with dread. She slid a folder across the desk. "This came from Discovery," she explained. Inside were copies of emails between Evan and the clinic, dated months before our divorce. I skimmed them, my breath catching. In one, he had asked the clinic to discard our embryos, calling them a waste of resources. In another, he had written that he didn't want to be tied down with kids from a failed marriage. My chest tightened. Proof. He had once tried to erase the very lives he now fought to claim. "Why didn't they tell me?" I whispered. My lawyer's face softened. "Because they didn't have to. Until we asked for records, this stayed buried." The fury inside me burned away my exhaustion. He had lied under oath, painting himself as a desperate father, while behind closed doors he had begged for destruction. I thought of his mother's letters, dripping with judgment, and realized she must not even know about this. Or maybe she did, and she didn't care. We added the emails to our file, evidence stronger than any testimony. That night I couldn't sleep. The twins shifted restlessly, as if sensing my turmoil. I laid my hands on my belly and whispered, "We have the truth now. They can't twist it forever." The next hearing came quickly. The courtroom air was thick, charged. Evan sat smugly, his mother beside him in pearls, pretending righteousness. When my lawyer presented the emails, the room shifted. The judge raised his brows, reading line after line aloud. Evan's face drained of color, his composure cracking for the first time. His mother leaned in, whispering furiously, her nails digging into his arm. "This doesn't change anything," his lawyer sputtered, but the judge silenced him. "It changes a great deal," he said firmly. "It demonstrates intent to destroy what you now claim to want." My lungs filled with something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Outside as we left, Evan caught up with me. His face was twisted with anger. "Where did you get those?" he demanded. I met his glare without flinching. "The truth has a way of surfacing. You should have remembered that before you tried to bury it." His jaw worked, but no words came. His mother pulled him away, her eyes venomous, as though I had betrayed her, not the other way around. I watched them retreat, their power suddenly dimmed, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. That evening, I returned home and placed the ultrasound photo back on the fridge. The twins rolled inside me, stronger now, their kicks sharp and insistent. "We did it," I whispered. "We showed them who you are and who I am. They can't erase us." Yet I knew the battle wasn't over. Evan's pride wouldn't let him back down easily, not with his mother pushing him. But the tide had shifted. I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was wielding truth like a weapon, and it cut deeper than money ever could. As I drifted to sleep, a quiet certainty settled over me. No matter how long the fight lasted, I wasn't the broken woman he had left behind. I was a mother armed with proof, carrying 2 lives who were already teaching me how to survive. And survival, I realized, was only the beginning. By the time autumn arrived, the twins were almost ready to greet the world. My body was heavy, stretched, every step a careful effort, yet inside I carried a new strength. The emails had shifted everything. The courtroom no longer saw me as desperate, but as determined. And I saw myself not as abandoned, but reborn. At 38 weeks, the doctor scheduled a planned delivery. My hospital bag sat ready by the door, filled with tiny clothes, blankets, and the faint scent of lavender soap. I would catch myself staring at the bag, smiling, then crying, then smiling again. For years, I had walked into clinics with nothing but hope and walked out empty. Now I would walk into a hospital and leave with 2 lives in my arms. The final hearing came just days before my delivery date. The courtroom was tense, reporters even present after whispers of custody battles over unborn twins spread through town. Evan looked pale, his suit too tight, his mother rigid beside him. My lawyer spoke with precision, presenting every piece of evidence: the abandonment, the cruel emails, the attempt to erase the embryos. When the judge turned to Evan, asking if he wanted to amend his statement, he stayed silent. His silence spoke louder than any defense. The judge's words cut through the air. Custody is granted to the mother, full and exclusive. My knees almost buckled. Relief surged through me like light after a storm. Evan's mother gasped, her hand clutching her pearls as if dignity itself had been stolen. Evan stared at the floor, jaw tight, the mask of control shattered. I walked out of that courtroom taller than I had entered. Not because I had beaten them, but because I had proven to myself that love and truth could stand against lies and influence. On the courthouse steps, I pressed a hand to my belly and whispered, "We won, my loves, we won." 3 days later, my water broke in the middle of the night. Panic and excitement collided as I called the nurse and rushed to the hospital. Hours of pain blurred together until finally 2 cries pierced the room. One strong, one softer, both beautiful. The doctor placed them in my arms, 2 tiny wrinkled miracles with fists clenched tight, as if ready to fight the world with me. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I kissed their foreheads again and again. "You're safe," I whispered. "You're mine, forever." When Evan's mother tried to send flowers to the hospital, I told the nurse to refuse them. There was no room for her poison in this sacred space. For the first time in 6 years, my life was not about pleasing, defending, or proving. It was about holding, about protecting, about beginning. The night after their birth, the twins lay in clear bassinets beside me, tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. I stared at them for hours, memorizing every detail: the curl of their fingers, the softness of their hair, the miracle of their existence. My body ached, my future uncertain, but I'd never felt more complete. I thought of the woman who had once sat crying on a kitchen floor, holding a file of failed treatments and broken dreams. She had felt empty, erased. But now that woman was gone. In her place stood someone new. A mother. A survivor. A woman reborn. And as I drifted into exhausted sleep, I knew one truth above all. This was not the end of my story. It was only the beginning of ours. The weeks after bringing the twins home were a blur of sleepless nights, feedings, and the fragile joy of new life. My apartment, once silent and hollow, now pulsed with cries, laughter, and the soft hum of lullabies I sang under my breath. The exhaustion was bone deep, but so was the happiness. For the first time in 6 years, I felt whole. Yet the shadow of Evan and his mother lingered, threatening the peace I had built. My lawyer had warned me, they may try again, especially if they think they can twist public opinion. And indeed, Evan's mother began giving interviews to local papers, painting me as manipulative, claiming I had stolen her grandchildren. Reading her words was like swallowing glass. But unlike before, I no longer felt powerless. I had truth. I had evidence. And now I had my children in my arms. One morning, a subpoena arrived. Evan's mother was being investigated for interference in the custody case. The emails between her and the clinic, uncovered during discovery, revealed she had pressured staff to send duplicate notices to Evan, hoping to ignite conflict. She hadn't expected her scheme to surface. The law was finally turning its gaze on her. When the hearing came, I didn't need to testify. The evidence spoke louder than anything I could say. Evan's mother sat rigid in the courtroom, her face pale as the judge read the charges. Obstruction, harassment, attempted manipulation of medical records. Evan sat beside her, but this time, his shoulders slumped in defeat. For once, the power they wielded had cracked, and the whole town was watching. The judge's ruling was swift. She was fined heavily and barred from contacting me or the twins. Evan, stripped of credibility, withdrew his appeal. It was over. Truly over. I left the courthouse with my twins bundled in a stroller, the autumn air crisp against my face, and felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. Justice had been served, not just in law, but in truth. Life slowly began to settle into a rhythm. At the library, patrons cooed over the babies, offering gentle smiles and small gifts. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, filling my freezer with kindness. I wasn't alone, I realized. I had built a quiet army of support. People who believed in me, who saw the strength I had fought so hard to uncover. At night, when the twins finally slept, I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the city lights flicker. I thought of the woman I used to be, afraid, silenced, erased by a husband's betrayal and a mother-in-law's cruelty. That woman had once believed her story was over. But here I was, cradling two miracles, stronger than I ever imagined. One evening, as I rocked the twins, I whispered, "We're safe now. We're free." Their tiny fingers curled around mine, and I felt it in my bones. This was not just survival. This was victory. Evan faded from my thoughts, a ghost of a past life I no longer needed. His mother, stripped of her power, could no longer haunt me. The wounds remained, yes, but they no longer bled. They had turned into scars, proof of battles fought and won. I looked at my children, their breaths soft and steady, and smiled. The journey had been long, cruel, and full of fire. But it had brought me here, to love, to freedom, to the beginning of a new story. And I knew, as sure as the sunrise, that the best chapters were still ahead. 5 years later, my mornings are no longer silent. They begin with laughter, with tiny feet running across wooden floors, with voices calling, "Mommy, wake up!" The twins, Anna and James, are 5 now. Their hair still smells of sunshine after they've been outside, and their eyes sparkle with the same fierce determination I once carried alone. We live in a small house on the edge of town, nothing grand, but filled with warmth. The garden is messy with wildflowers the children planted, their hands clumsy but proud. In the evenings, we sit on the porch and watch fireflies rise like stars from the grass. They ask me about everything: why the moon follows us, why trees sway in the wind, why love can hurt but still be worth it. I tell them stories, not about courts or battles, not about the nights I thought I would break. I tell them about courage, about how sometimes the bravest thing we can do is keep going when it feels impossible. And when they look up at me with wide eyes, I know they feel safe. That is all I ever wanted. Evan is a ghost now, a name that drifts further away with every passing year. His mother's bitterness faded into silence once the law closed its doors on her schemes. They no longer have power over me. They are shadows, and I no longer live in the dark. As I sit at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, the twins painting at my side, I realize healing isn't sudden. It comes in moments, in the giggle of children chasing each other, in neighbors waving as they pass, in the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. I touch the scar of my past, not with pain, but with gratitude, because it led me here, to this morning, to this love, to this quiet, ordinary happiness that feels extraordinary after all I endured. And as the twins climb into my lap, smudging my shirt with paint-stained hands, I know the truth I once doubted. I am not broken. I am whole. We are whole.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.